Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to another video. Today's topic is going to be major and minor mistakes while reciting the Quran. So let's get started. On the agenda today, we're going to review the previous lesson as usual. We're going to have the warm-ups and we're going to go over memorizing of the letter collections. Then we're going to go into the meat of today's presentation, which is major and minor mistakes while reciting the Quran. I'll give you an example recitation and how I learned it, and then I'm going to give you some exercise and homework, and that will be the end of today's lesson. Okay. Review. Last time the topic that we had was the topic of tajweed. And what is the linguistic definition of tajweed? It means to refine or to make better. Specifically, in the context of the recitation of the Quran, it is to refine and make better or beautify the recitation of the Quran. This learning and correcting your pronunciation of the Quran is obligatory upon Muslims. It is not optional, specifically for the reason that if you have any major mistakes in reciting the Quran, especially related to Surah Al-Fatiha, because you have your 5 daily prayers, that becomes a major problem. So learning the correct pronunciation of the Quran is obligatory upon Muslims, especially making sure that you get rid of the major mistakes in your recitation, and we'll talk about that today. Some manners while reciting the Quran: you have to make sure you're clean, make sure you are present in mind, and whatever you're reciting, you make sure that you think about that, ponder it, and be present and thinking about what you're reciting. And keep in mind that this is the word of Allah that you're reciting. And also, whenever you are reciting, another good thing to do while you're reciting the Quran is to make dua while reciting the Quran. So for example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something about heaven, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you paradise. And if he in the Quran is mentioning anything related to hell, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from that. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning anything related to, to do something or not to do something, make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the tawfiq to do that and to prevent you from doing those sins that the Quran warns against. Okay, warm-ups, you already know the drill. Go ahead, please watch the warm-ups video. I've given you a short version and the long version. If you have not done the warm-ups before, go watch the long version. But if you've been doing the warm-ups, go watch the short version. Please do not skip. It's you'll find that in my channel. Okay. Letter collections. Again, we're going to review and memorize the letter collections: throat letters, lip letters, tafkhim, idgham, mad, and qalqala letters. So let's get started. What were the throat letters? The throat letters were Hamza, Ha, Ain, Ha, and Ghain, and Kha. Those are the throat letters: Hamza, Ha, Ain, Ha, Ghain, Kha. Do you remember your lip letters? They are Fa, Waw, Ba, and Mim. Fa, Waw, Ba, and Mim. Those are the lip letters. Specifically, those were the letters or the lip letters whose articulation point is from the lips. What are the tafkhim letters? These are letters that are always heavy, and you pronounce them as if you have a mouthful of food, or you sound like an opera singer. Sad, Dad, Ba, Wa, Ghain, Kha, and Qaf. Even when I'm giving you the collection, listen to how heavy my voice seems to become. Sad, Dad, Ba, Wa, Ghain, Kha, and Qaf. Those are the tafkhim letters, always heavy. Idgham letters. If you remember what are the idgham letters are yarmaloon. Ya, Ra, Mim, Lam, Waw, and Noon. Yarmaloon. We will talk about idgham in an upcoming video in the tajweed section, but you have to remember Ya, Ra, Mim, Lam, Waw, and Noon are idgham letters. What are mud letters? There are 3 mud letters. Alif, Waw, and Ya are the 3 mud letters. And qalqala letters are remembered by Jad Qutub or Qutub Jad. Qaf, ba, ba, jim, and dal. These are the letters that you're supposed to bounce a little when you have a sukoon on them. You're supposed to bounce the sound a little. That's what qalqala means, when they have a sukoon on them and when you're reciting the Quran. Those were the letter collections. Moving on to today's lesson. First, we're going to talk about lahan khafi, and which specifically means this is one of the types of mistakes that you can make while reciting the Quran. And lahan khafi means a minor mistake, and it is a mistake that you can make while reciting the Quran, but it does not necessarily change the meaning of the Quran, but it does reduce the beauty of the Quran. Meaning that it's a problem, but it's not a major problem. Minor. It's a minor problem for the reason that you're not necessarily changing the meaning of the Quran. Now, these mistakes should be corrected. Obviously, look at the fact that I've put the should in quotation marks, and obviously the next when we're going to contrast lahan khafi with lahan jali, which is going to be major mistakes, those are the mistakes that must be corrected. But these mistakes should be corrected. What that means, we will discuss a little bit in this video. Now, the reason these mistakes should be corrected is because continuing to make these mistakes is highly undesirable. It's makruh. You should not continue to make these mistakes. But if you continue to make these mistakes, it doesn't essentially necessarily invalidate your recitation of the Quran or cause you to commit a major sin. However, contrary to lahan khafi, lahan jali, which means a major mistake, is a mistake that one makes, or anyone who makes while reciting the Quran, it changes the meaning of the Quran, or at times it can make the words nonsensical. So what does that mean? I gave you an example in one of my previous videos of qalb versus kalb. It's a very classic example that I've seen my brothers from India and Pakistan and the Indo-Pak subcontinent making. They can't pronounce the qaf and the kaf correctly. And what ends up happening, if you call qalb with a qaf, a kalb with a kaf, kalb means dog, whereas qalb with a qaf means heart. That obviously changes the meaning a whole lot. And therefore, because of the fact that these are major mistakes and these can change the meaning of the Quran or make the Quran, the words of the Quran, seem as if it's nonsense, these mistakes, quote unquote, must be corrected. And what do I mean by that? Continuing to make these mistakes unknowingly is highly undesirable. Meaning, if you don't know that you're making these mistakes, you are not as much at fault. But knowingly making these mistakes is a major problem. Meaning, if you know that qalb means heart and kalb means dog, but if you knowingly, and you know that that's the case, but you continue to do that, that is a major sin and can lead to kufr. That's a problem. So these kinds of mistakes, you have to make sure that, or at least the reason I've put in quotes, I will make clear the fact that they must be corrected. Why I put that in quotes, I will make sure to clarify that in just a second. But again, lahan jali are those mistakes that are major and they might change the meaning of the Quran, and these are mistakes that must be corrected. Now, here's the reason why I put both the should and the must in quotes, especially for beginners of reciters of the Quran, is because I don't want you to be disheartened by the mistakes that you make. Especially when you're learning to recite the Quran, you're going to make minor mistakes and you're going to even make major mistakes. That's okay. You must be thinking, wait a minute, wait just a second. Just a second ago, I was saying that it's a major mistake and it must be corrected and it can lead to kufr and it's a major sin, etc. And on the other hand, I'm telling you it's okay. Isn't that contradictory? Well, no, it's not. Because this fact was not lost upon the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This ummah is going to have a lot of new Muslims and even people who don't know Arabic. It's not their native tongue. And this is going to happen, that those people who are learning to recite the Quran, or at least are beginning to learn to recite the Quran, they're going to make mistakes. That's It's human. It's human to err. What is required of you is you should try and to correct those mistakes. And this is what is reported by Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the one who is proficient in the Quran is associated with the noble, upright recording angels. And he who falters in it and finds it difficult will have 2 rewards. Now, what does that mean? For those people who are beginning, or at least are having to start reciting the Quran, what you will find is you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to have difficulty. Your reward is double those who are reciting the Quran perfectly. And here's why. Because you have difficulty, number one, you get the reward for trying or reciting the Quran. That reward is yours. But the second reward is also yours because you're finding it difficult, and despite finding it difficult, you're sticking with it. Therefore, the Messenger of Allah, so what you should do is, this is the time that you should enjoy, in the sense that when you are beginning and you have not perfected your recitation yet, you're getting double the reward for the same amount of effort, double the pay for the same work. Okay, I'll take that deal. So rejoice in the fact that yes, you're going to make mistakes, and yes, you should be correcting them. But if you are making mistakes, don't be disheartened by them. It's very difficult for, beginners, especially adults, because they are so hard upon themselves sometimes when they make mistakes, and they become disheartened, and they can, become so disheartened that I will never learn this, and they can give up. That is the worst thing you can do when it comes to making mistakes. It's okay, quote unquote. That's the reason I put in the must and the should in quotes. It's okay if you are making mistakes, as long as you're attempting to correct them. I hope that's clear. It is better for you to learn the correct pronunciation than to enumerate mistakes. Now, what do I mean by that? The mistakes can be plenty. And basically, the mistakes can be unlimited. What do I mean by that? The correct way of pronunciation is actually singular. There's only one correct way. How to pronounce things correctly is one way. But there can be numerous mistakes. So instead of trying to, enumerate every possible mistake that you can make, because mistakes can actually trying to, point out mistakes, or at least tell people mistakes that can happen, that can develop a sort of this negative mental model that, you can focus on the mistakes instead of focusing on the correct pronunciation, which is not the correct thing to do. What you should be focusing on is learning the correct pronunciation. And don't worry as much about, okay, here's a mistake, here's another mistake, here's another mistake, because mistakes can be countless. Mistakes can be countless. So focus on correcting your pronunciation, the one correct pronunciation. But in order to give you a quick taste of what's possible, I'm going to give you some examples. So here there are, for some lahan khafi examples. One of the examples of a minor mistake is if you overlook the rules of the thick or the full-mouthed letters, the tafkhim letters, one of the collections that we talked about at the beginning of this video. And basically, the thin and empty mouth letters, you ignore their thickness, ignore the thickness of the tafkhim letters, and you ignore the thinness or emptiness of the mouth of the taqiq letters. One example here is غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ. So, ghain and dad are among the tafkhim letters, right? So what's going to happen? What you want to make sure of is you pronounce them heavy. But if you don't pronounce them heavy, I'm not even going to give you the incorrect pronunciation, because you should not do, and again, just like I said before, you should not be making or enumerating mistakes. Mistakes can be plentiful. But it's an example. The correct pronunciation is غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ. Make sure the ghain, the two ghains, and the dad are heavy. Another example is of lahan khafi is possibly, or one possible example is to not adhere to the rules of idghar, idgham, ikhfa in their respective places in the Quran. So for example, one example that I've given you here is min sharri. Min sharri. Notice that the noon I'm holding in my nose a little bit. I'm saying min sharri. The reason I'm saying min sharri, and we're going to go over these rules related to ahkam an-nun as-sakina wa tanween in a future video. But if I don't hold it, if I say min sharri, that is incorrect. And that is an example of a minor mistake. And another example of a minor mistake, which is lahan khafi, is to not prolong a letter when a mad is present. And again, this is an example in Surah Al-Fatiha, the last word, ضالين. Now, this bod, fatha, alif, mad, lam, shadda, this has to be held to 6 counts. Maddul lazim has to be held to 6 counts, and if you are not holding it, because it's difficult for beginners holding that long. That's why one of my warm-ups is saying ah and counting to 6 for that reason. Dhalin has to be held to 6 counts, so you have to say dhalin. But if you shorten it, or if you shorten this mad, this will become an example of lahan khafi, or a minor mistake. Now, examples of or possible lahan jali, major mistakes. One of the examples I gave you, qalb versus kalb, which is not pronouncing the letters from their correct articulation point. Sadaqa versus sadaka. Or making additions to words. For example, the word is Rabbi. Notice it's just ba kasra. But if you add a ya sukun, as if you adding your ya sukun, you say Rabbi. It's Rabbi. But if you add, or if you elongate or make an addition to this word, you make it Rabbi. That's a problem, and that can become lahan jali, a major mistake. And another possible major mistake that you can make is making omissions from words. For example, inna. Now, this noon fatha alif sukun, this word right here, let me find my mouse and point it out. This word right here, inna, if you just pronounce it in, because noon fatha alif sukun, you have to hold that to 2 counts. If you just say in, you are omitting this alif sukun from this word, and that is an example of a major mistake. And another example of a major mistake is replacing diacritics. One example would be to pronounce tajiri, which is ta fatha jim sukun. So this jim is going to have a qalqala. Remember the qalqala letters we talked about earlier in the video? This jim sukun has to be bounced. So you have to say tajiri, a little bit of a bounce on the jim. But a mistake would be to call, instead of saying tajiri, you say tajari. Tajari. Now jim fatha is 1 count, whereas jim sukun is a bounce. You have to make sure you know the difference, and if you want, you can go back through my channel and watch the video on qalqala letters, making sukun on qutub jad, to make sure you understand the difference. This is tajri and this is tajari, and basically turning tajri into tajari is incorrect, and basically what you're doing is you're replacing the sukun diacritic with the fatha diacritic, and that is a major mistake. So today I'm going to give you an example, and this is an exercise that I did for quite some time. It's because of my repetition and parroting of good reciters that my recitation became good. One of my favorite reciters is Mishar Rashid, and I'm going to pronounce and recite some of the first few verses of Surah Taha in the style of Mishar Rashid. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وهل أتاك حديث موسى. Now, I must have listened to Mishar al-Rashid reciting Surah Taha countless times. And because of that, my recitation A became good. And because I kept listening to him and trying to parrot after him, what ended up happening is whenever I saw a similar word anywhere in the Quran, because it was drilled into my head with proper recitation over and over again while I was listening, I was able to correct my recitation. Now, one of my problems that I used to have was my ikhfa and idhar problem. And I was able to correct it because I was parroting good reciters. So one thing I would recommend you do, go ahead, find your favorite reciter and keep listening to one surah, that your favorite surah or the favorite type of recitation, over and over again, and basically try to recite along with them. Try to parrot them. See, because this will help you correct your recitation a lot. Next, I'm going to do some quick verses, some quick recitation from Surah Al-Fath in the recitation style of Sudais. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا ليغفر لك الله ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر ويتم نعمته عليك ويهديك صراطا مستقيما وينصرك الله نصرا عزيزا هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عليما حكيما. So, what was the point of this recitation? What I want you to do is I want you to do what I did when I was in your place. Go ahead, find a favorite reciter, and from that favorite reciter, pick one of your favorite surahs and listen to them reciting over and over again. Number one, it will help you memorize. And next time when you are reading that surah directly from the Mus'haf, you will realize what inflections and what changes that recite, or what recitations that reciter is making, and how to pronounce everything. These are your resources, so use them. So tips and tricks. Be patient. This is a process. Be kind to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't get it. Remember, if you make mistakes, it's quote unquote okay. Yeah, it is. No, you should definitely try to correct them. Definitely you should be trying to correct them. But if you're having difficulty, you have to have patience with yourself and understand and rejoice in the fact that the difficulty that you're finding in it, that difficulty causes you to get double the reward. And therefore, because of that reward, you should remain persistent. You should remain persistent and keep trying to change and keep trying to correct your mistakes as much as possible and be proactive in making changes in your recitation. Finally, listen to good reciters and parrot after them. Repeat after them as much as possible. And go to your local masjid. This I have been saying over and over again, so I'm going to say it again. Go to your local masjid and find someone. Ask someone who knows how to recite the Quran to teach you. And one of the homeworks that I'm going to give you today is going to be just that. So another thing I can recommend is go to ijaza.com and ask for Sheikh Hassan Adli. He is my teacher, a recitation teacher, and he is very good. So inshallah, go to ijaza.com and ask for Sheikh Hassan Adli, and inshallah, these are the ways that basically you just have to be patient and keep at it. There is no other way to say it. Be patient and keep at it. Be persistent. For your homework, I'm not going to have a, actually, yes, I am, because I do have a self-test for you. Maybe I don't think I'm going to make a self-test video. Maybe I will. I don't know yet. But I definitely know I did prepare a self-test, so I'm going to put a link of the self-test in the description below. One of your homeworks today is going to be to go to your local masjid and find someone who can listen to you and then ask them to tell you what are the major mistakes that you're making in Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, why specifically Surah Al-Fatiha? For the reason that it is part of your 5 daily prayers, we have to make sure that Al-Fatiha's pronunciation is perfected before anything. And in fact, one of the things you will learn if you do go sign up with ijaza.com, that they make everybody, anytime anybody is reciting any part of the Quran to anybody else, the first thing they do is always recite Surah Al-Fatiha without fail. We have to perfect the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, why are we not focusing on minor mistakes? Well, I think that should be obvious enough, because minor mistakes are minor. Now, please don't be disheartened. Please don't be disheartened. Please don't be disheartened by the mistakes you made, but rejoice. Yes, you should be correcting them, no doubt about it, but please don't get disheartened by them. And you will find a link to the self-test in the description of the video below. In conclusion, what did we talk about today? What are major and minor mistakes? What is the meaning of major minor mistakes in the Quran? And some examples of the major minor mistakes that can happen while you're reciting the Quran. We went over some tips and tricks for getting better in your recitation. And please, please, I ask you, be patient and be persistent. And if I can ask you, please like this video, comment on the video, and subscribe to the channel, and help me share this content with others and increase in the reward. Jazakallah khair for watching. I will see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.